Hi, this is Dr. Audrey Ray with Thriving in Admin. See, I'm back already. I just did my first video about 30 seconds ago, and I felt like I really wanted to add something on the subject of starting this new academic year on a good note, feeling empowered and not letting your work life really take over your personal life. Something else I want to bring to your attention. So you guys have a lot of pressure that is real. There's a lot of expectations from a lot of people, and those are real. And there's obviously some influence you can have over changing other people's expectations and in how you're communicating and all this. But before we even go into all this, I'd like to invite you to be able to identify your own expectations. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Most of my clients, honestly, are high performing. They are extremely ambitious, incredible people, and they're doing great. I don't really work with people who are struggling and need a lot because we're probably not the best of fit. My target market is definitely those already high performing, high achieving people who love to learn, who love to grow, who love to stretch and to become more self-aware. So typically the kind of issues that I see with some of my clients isn't so much that they're not doing their job or there's something wrong. What I'm seeing sometimes is a lot of effort and energy and time spent on things that are not really important. As it's funny, I have flashbacks from my days in the California community college system. There was a time they kept talking about moving the needle, moving the needle. That was the big thing back then. Just look at it as return on investment. When you're investing time and effort, you want to know you're creating some sort of outcome. Just being busy for the sake of being busy doesn't bring a whole lot of value. So going back to my original topic here about understanding what your own expectations are. There's so many things that you do every day, and they're not necessarily because it's a requirement of your job or because other people want you to. It's you meeting your own standards. And this is actually really good because this is one of the ways that you can be more confident and more at ease and have less stress is by being very clear on your own standards and meeting your standards. So I'm a big fan of knowing what your standards are. But sometimes I hear people creating standards that are really not necessary for anybody other than themselves. And if those standards make them miserable because it's too much, it's too hard, it's just too stressful, then it's an opportunity to step back and say, do you really want to continue doing things like this or not? So I'll give you an example. Very often, I work with high power, very strong, ambitious, high performing women. These women are just absolutely incredible, but they tend to drive themselves really hard. There is no margin for mistakes. There's no margin for ever making excuses on anything, which is one of the reasons why we actually enjoy each other so much, because I hate people who make excuses. But they get to the point where they hold themselves accountable for too much, and even when it's not really necessary. So when you're looking at this year ahead and all the things you feel you have to do, question if it's really true. Whatever you feel you need to do immediately, ask yourself, is this really true or not? So I'll give you an example. I often have clients who tell me they spend time every single night catching up on emails because during the day they have meetings, they have things to do. So they're getting into, they can create some tension at home with their families or just for themselves. They don't have enough time for themselves. Maybe their nights are too short. Maybe they're not getting enough sleep because they're holding a belief that everything must be answered on the exact same day. Absolutely everything. And I agree that it's good to be responsive, but I'm also a big fan of boundaries. They're essential for your health and your mental health as well. So sometimes I have clients who tell me, well, I have to answer all emails on the day of because if I want to keep my job. And that just blows my mind because I'm going to be really honest with you here. So many people make efforts and their justification is if I want to keep my job. And they don't realize that when it is somebody who is already 100% reliable on everything at all times, and people are already looking at them like maybe they're a robot, maybe they're not even human, maybe they don't have flaws, maybe there's something weird because they're just so good that they also appear very rigid. When somebody finds herself or himself in that kind of situation, it actually creates a separation between that leader and the rest of people. They're harder to relate to. Sometimes people feel less comfortable in their presence because that person who never makes a mistake, who's never late on anything, who's always on top of everything at all times, creates impossible standards that makes other people feel sometimes inadequate or insecure. They can sometimes appear, I'm not saying they do, but they sometimes appear as lacking compassion. And it's not that they don't have compassion, it's just that they look so strong at all times that it's not necessarily really good for their professional relationships and their career. So imagine that you are someone like that, that you feel that you must do everything on the same day or else what if you lose your job? Well, I'm going to break you some news that you're probably not going to like, but I'm going to say it the way I see it because that's all I know is being honest. I have never ever seen in my entire career somebody who was 100% accurate, reliable, just doing everything right for years and decades. And then one day they did not answer an email right away. They got to it the next morning and they got fired for it. It just never happens. If you are already off the chart, meeting expectations higher than any expectations any human being has for you, if you feel like you mess up, but you're actually just being human once in a while, not only are you not at risk of losing your job, but you are actually more likely to start letting people feel more connected to you, making people feel more at ease around you and safer around you because now you're starting to look human. You don't look like a rigid machine that is potentially very intimidating. The thing too is that when we're too uptight, too rigid, too focused, it feels a little addictive because there's so much adrenaline and there's some power in that. So I know I have clients who love that zone of being hyper productive, hyper focused, and almost working like a machine. It's almost wartime. And a long, long time ago, I used to be like that. So I can remember it enough to be able to relate, even though it's not my reality at all anymore. If you saw my life today, I'm definitely not working much anymore. I just do what I want to do, what makes me happy, and that's about it. So it's not my reality, but it used to be. So I can relate. But it's something that comes with a lot of side effects. Often it's adrenal fatigue, all sorts of physiological consequences. But really, when we're talking about leadership, what does it do to your teams? What does it do to people who look at you and can't relate? What does it do to you modeling standards that nobody can really meet unless they're ready to give up so much in their personal life? So my point is, when you want to meet your own expectations, I invite you to reconsider them and ask yourself, are those expectations really serving you? Are those standards really serving you? Are you sure you need to do those things? And if you'd like to make some changes, then you can come up with systems or structures and ways to still make sure you meet other people's expectations. I'm not suggesting you stop answering emails. I'm not suggesting that you just blow off your boss, your president, or your provost when they need something. I'm not stupid. I'm not crazy. I know you have responsibilities. But maybe not stressing yourself out so much by having impossible standards. So that's something to keep in mind, knowing your expectations versus others. And if you are one of those people who are pretty obsessed with, this is what I need to keep my job, I've got to tell you, people very rarely get fired for reasons that they truly understand and could have expected. I see people being let go primarily for two reasons. Some are just incompetence, but those aren't my clients because I can't coach somebody who's not competent. There's nothing I can do. I can't teach them their job, so I don't really work with people who are incompetent. But I sometimes work with people who are a little oblivious to other people's perspectives and emotions, and they don't really know how to navigate those professional relationships. So let's say that, for example, you are somebody who values accuracy above all. Accuracy is what drives you. You are at risk of being a little insensitive or being a little overly critical when other people make mistakes, or just making people feel like perhaps you're micromanaging when you feel you don't quite trust them because they make mistakes, so now they're worrying you and you feel like you've got to be on top of it. So you see how there can be some behaviors that can hurt your professional relationships. And depending on who it is that doesn't feel good about working with you, that's how you start getting more drama with perhaps your boss or somebody who sort of puts a target on your back and wants you gone. Or that's how you may have a vote of no confidence if your faculty feels like they can't work with you because you're so focused on accuracy and details that it doesn't meet their needs in a different way. So hopefully you cannot relate to any of that because this is not your reality. So maybe I'm going to stop with examples because this is actually a conversation that would be better had one-on-one with someone when I know the story. But my point is, when somebody is at risk of being pushed out, it's actually never because of what they're expecting. Something else I can tell you, I love when I work with somebody who has the courage and the willingness to be transparent and tell me, Audrey, I want to grow as a leader and I'm not sure I truly understand what my boss is saying, so can you take a look at my evaluation? Or if they did a 360 evaluation, that's even better. And what I find fascinating is that typically when somebody gets an evaluation that is not as outstanding as they would like it to be, what happens a lot of times, especially with those high-performing people that are so exceptional, is that they get a little defensive. So typically, whatever is on their radar as their own standards and expectations, they are already doing amazing. They're already doing phenomenal. There's no room for improvement. But if there's a few things that could use some improvement, it's harder for them to hear it. So sometimes they will either not quite understand what's being said, or maybe they will question if it's even true. Or sometimes they will just not even agree with what was said. So it's hard for them to improve in the ways that their supervisor would like them to improve because they're not really willing to listen. I'm tempted to give you an example, but I don't want to give you a client example because everything that's shared with me is privileged, it's confidential, and when I see trends and patterns that are true for a huge percentage of people that I speak to, I'm okay sharing that because it's like saying water is wet and the sky is blue, and it is just true for pretty much everybody, so it's okay to talk about it with those things. Oh, here's an example. Actually, not a client. Oh, that was an interesting one. So I spoke to a woman who was telling me she was complaining about her work environment. And she was telling me that she works for a Christian institution and how she felt very unhappy that she was being asked to be what she's not. She felt that she was being asked to be more of a mother type person, more nurturing, warmer. And she was telling me, I'm just not the mother kind. I just hate all that gender stereotype and I feel judged for being a woman because I'm not accepted as a woman, but if I were a man, then I would have zero problems. And she was not my client, so I didn't engage into much conversation because I felt like I just need to get away from this conversation because this is what I do all day long in my free time. I don't really want to go into that stuff, but I was a little bit curious, so we talked a bit longer. And what I found out about this person is that I personally did not enjoy her presence. I found her to be very short, very cold, very angry, very reactive, very defensive, and there was this yucky energy. Her heart was so closed. And my assessment of this conversation that I had with her was, I'm not sure that she's in trouble for not being a mother figure. I think she's just lacking compassion, and that's got nothing to do with gender or religion. If you follow my work, you'll see that I talk about compassionate leadership a lot because I really believe that the only way to truly motivate people, inspire people, and to do a good job as a leader is to lead with an open heart. You still want strategy, you still want to be very cautious about how you're communicating. I mean, you're not going to just be speaking randomly, hoping that just love and connection will fix it all. That's not what I'm talking about. And definitely not making excuses or letting people make excuses. But you've got to be able to connect with people for who they really are. And you've got to have an open heart, which is difficult for a lot of type A strong women that have been taught to compete in a men's world and feel like they need to be more masculine. I know that was true for me maybe 15 years ago. I was a very, very masculine woman in my approach to business and to work. My heart was closed. So I tend to be very sensitive to that. When I see it, I see a woman in pain. So this woman was just telling me how she felt discriminated against because of the religious beliefs of that institution, because she wasn't a mother, it wasn't her thing. And the entire time I just felt like, I don't think, maybe it is religion, maybe it is gender, I don't know. But in that moment, just being in that woman's presence felt so uncomfortable. Just wanted to walk away from that energy. So again, not a client, obviously, but the simple fact that I felt so uncomfortable in that presence because that person was so hostile, that's the word. That's the word I'm looking for. That hostility, that defensiveness is just such a yucky energy. And then I asked myself, did she say please to anybody or thank you? Or did she show signs of at least being polite or kind? But no, she was just so in her head that that's what made her unpleasant. So obviously I did not tell her what I do for a living. I clearly did not tell her, ooh, let's work together, let me help you. Because I just didn't want to be exposed to that energy again. And I don't know, obviously, what's going to happen to her, but it gave me some insights. And I'm thinking, could it be that sometimes some of you, some of my clients are getting feedback and you automatically write it off because you're thinking, oh, that's discrimination, or that's gender stereotype, or you're just dismissing it because you feel like it is something that you do not want to accept. But what if there's some truth to it? And what if it's not discrimination? What if there's actually something there? It just hasn't been communicated in a way that you can really sense it. So, wow, this video is going really long and I'm going all over the place, but really the subject here was managing your own expectations, which comes from self-awareness. Understand what your own expectations are. And if you're having those fearful thoughts, I don't want to get fired, I need to keep my job, then remember those words. You're probably not at risk of getting fired if you mess up one time on something you've done perfectly for the last 5 or 10,000 times. I don't believe you're at risk of losing your job, but if you are, it's probably because of something you're dismissing entirely. It's probably because of something that either was never brought to your attention, or it was brought to your attention and you were unable or you were unwilling to truly listen. So if you're really afraid about losing your job, there's certainly plenty you can do to become more aware of what's happening outside of you, become more aware of what's happening within you, and see if you want to make those changes to be able to keep your job, or if maybe you need to go work someplace where you are a better fit. Because the truth is, growth is fantastic, but when you have to become someone you're not to meet other people's expectations, but it means you're no longer allowed to be who you are, then you really need to get away and go somewhere else. So wow, this got dark pretty fast. I hope I didn't lose you. So what can I say? Maybe last final words of wisdom. Try to relax, reevaluate your expectations, and don't try so hard to do more of the same, more of the same, more of the same. Typically, more of the same is not going to guarantee job security or advancement. It's just more of the same. So if you're really looking to transform anything, consider something new. Consider a new learning goal, a new leadership development goal, but really look for something new. All right, I'm going to stop here. So bye, guys, and I'll see you tomorrow.